Hello and welcome back. This is episode 2 of the series on the most banned books in the US. The books we will discuss today are not quite as surprising, or at least not to me, as the ones we discussed in episode 1. I've heard about these books being on banned books list for a long time. However, 3 of them have been required reading, in the past at least, in many public high schools. I'd also like to apologize in advance. This week's video is a little bit disorganized. I've been unwell this last week and really had a hard time organizing my thoughts. And I'm hoping I can actually get this video out before the end of the day on Friday. It may go out on Saturday, we'll see. The first book on this list of banned books, some of the most banned books in the USA, is To Kill a Mockingbird, which I'm sure many of you have actually read in high school, and maybe not, I don't know. It's a Pulitzer Prize-winning novel by Harper Lee. It was published in 1960, but it is about events that take place in the mid-1930s. I did not read this book in high school. I have seen the film, but it's been a long, long time ago. Like many books on this list, it deals with topics such as sexual assault, racial inequality. It seems to be a common theme that books about racism or violence against women are often on banned books lists. It's almost as if someone doesn't want us to think about these topics too hard. I wonder who that would benefit. Anyway, after all, stories about these topics are all over modern news and social media, so it's not like you can hide from them. We can't make difficult topics disappear by just pretending they don't exist or not looking at them. The story of Mockingbird, while it's a fictional story, is based on some real-life events that occurred during the author's lifetime, and it has some verisimilitude to it from being based on real events. I would encourage people to read the book or watch the movie if you don't want to read the book. It's very good. It's very well written. And it is thought-provoking, even though it's about events in the past. Clearly, some things have not changed nearly enough, but we have made some progress since the 1930s. The next book on the list is also about a similar topic. In a way, The Color Purple is a novel by Alice Walker, which was published in 1982, another Pulitzer Prize winner and a winner of the National Book Award for Fiction. This work also has themes about misogyny and violence against women and racism. And while Mockingbird is told from the perspective of a young white girl, The Color Purple is told from the point of view of an African-American woman in the early 1900s in the American South. I think it's very important to read books from perspectives different from your own, but also it is important to read books that represent you. That's very empowering. So it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man or white or black. I think reading a book that shows you somebody else's point of view or being represented in a book are both equally valid reasons to read a book. I know some people prefer to read the book with a protagonist that looks like them. I like to read things from a lot of different perspectives. I think it helps build empathy. Of course, growing up, most of the protagonists in books I read were either men or boys because they really dominated fiction at the time. I mean, I read a lot of classic science fiction, and it's mostly dudes, lots of dudes. This is a very moving and also a very troubling book, not going to lie. They made a movie about it, had Oprah Winfrey in it. The movie was quite good. I remember watching the movie. There are some differences, as there always are, between the book and the movie, so there's that. I was not surprised that book ended up on the banned books list because of the topics it covers. We'll talk about that in the summary at the end. The next book is Animal Farm, which takes us back into our dystopian novels, which dominated the last list. Animal Farm is a book by George Orwell. It was published in 1945. It is an allegory using anthropomorphized animals to expose corruption in political systems. The animals take over the farm in an uprising against a cruel farmer and institute the following rules, which they call the commandments. Whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. Whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. No animal shall wear clothes. No animal shall sleep in a bed. No animal shall drink alcohol. And no animal shall kill any other animal. All animals are equal. Later, as the pigs rise to dominance on the farm, these rules get amended to no animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets. No animal shall drink alcohol to excess, and no animal shall kill any other animal without cause. And all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. I mentioned that last rule that changed in my Mussolini videos, when Mussolini, who had started out as a socialist, gave up on the egalitarian ideals of socialism for the elitist tenets of fascism. It's that the danger of having a revolution is you can end up with a dictatorship or an oligarchy. And this book really neatly describes how the Soviet system of communism quickly gave way to an oligarchy. The book was so successful in its criticism of communism that an animated film was made in 1954 that was funded by the CIA. The film version I saw as a child, I just happened on it flipping through the channels in cable TV. I didn't know what it was and was totally unprepared for all the death and injustice and terrible things in the film. They did change the ending in the animated version. They had the pigs overthrown in a second revolution, probably because it was CIA funded and the idea of overthrowing communist governments was big with them. Understanding how revolutions often go wrong, which was something the founding fathers of the U.S. worried about quite a bit, is a good takeaway from this very disturbing book. In a way, for me, the fact that the characters are all animals made everything, all the violence and everything, much worse. Maybe because I've just come to expect humans to be horrible to each other, but the idea that farm animals are awful to each other was too much for my child mind to take. I would recommend reading the book over watching the film because the film does have significant changes in it, although it is an interesting little piece of Cold War propaganda. And of course, my brain went offline for a moment. George Orwell also wrote 1984, which is also on the most banned books list, but I decided to talk about Animal Farm because you hear about it less often. It is an interesting read, an allegory, sort of a parable about how things can go horribly pear-shaped even when you have good intentions. So the last book on the list is in a dystopian future. It's Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, which I have only read about halfway through. I don't have that much time for reading fiction these days. I've been reading a lot of nonfiction. I just started doing some research for another set of videos I want to do, and it's all nonfiction. So there is a film of this as well. A friend of mine has seen it. I have not seen the film. This was first published in 1932, and it's about a dystopian future set in the year 2540. So that's still in our future. But the characters call the year 632 AF, or after Ford, because Henry Ford has become their messiah-like figure. 1932. What's interesting about this one being one of the earlier dystopian novels is it doesn't have, like a lot of later novels, either the dystopia is based on Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia. And this is before those things really happened. I mean, the Nazis were starting, but Brave New World is very different. It's very different kind of manipulation of the public that's used in Orwell's later novels. It's very different from most of the dystopian novels we've covered, because in Brave New World, it's a class society with fixed castes, and they use drugs and sex and entertainment to keep the populace complacent. People are born from artificial wombs and are taught via sleep learning. It is a dystopia that its creators and rulers see as a utopia, and most of the inhabitants actually agree. There isn't kind of the misery that you get in Orwell's 1984. It's an interesting take on how people can become complacent about being manipulated as long as their main needs are being met, or as long as they're being entertained. Kind of bread and circuses kind of thinking. It is one of the few dystopian novels where most people are not interested in rebelling, or just been so beaten down that they can't rebel. The majority of the society in Brave New World are perfectly happy with their drug-induced euphoria. They don't want to change. There's only a handful of characters that see the whole way that society is run as a problem. The people in Huxley's story are basically delighted to give up on creativity and freedom in exchange for certainty and peace. And this book will really make you think about what makes a dystopia or a utopia, and how different it could be depending on what you think is important. It's a very strange and disturbing world, and it is scarier in some ways than Orwell's 1984. I think it's probably a little truer to human behavior. And it's interesting. I mean, it was written after the heady economic times of the 1920s had come to a crash. In the 20s, people had all thought that technology was going to save us and make the world a better place. And people began to be cynical about that kind of world more in the 1930s. And then the invention of nuclear weapons really made people cynical about how much technology was going to make the world a better place. So those are this week's banned books that I don't think should be banned. The common thing in all of the banned books we've examined is that they make you think, especially about uncomfortable subjects. If you are afraid of thinking, or afraid you might change your mind about something if you think about it too much, I could see where many of these books would make you uncomfortable. I read to think about things and maybe see something from a new perspective. In these days when we are constantly bombarded with other people's opinions in the mainstream media and social media, and even on YouTube, which I guess is just part of social media, but I think it's important to figure out what your own opinions really are. If you know who you are, it's harder for other people to manipulate you. And I think reading is a really good way to think about what you really think and figure out for yourself how you want to see things. So, let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought. Give a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Next week's topic is a bit undecided at the moment. I put out a survey on the community tab on YouTube and nobody responded. So I started researching the history of the American healthcare system, but that's going to take a while to do and get the research done and the writing done on that. So it'll probably be January before we do that one. So we'll see what next week holds, what I can get done by next week. Be kind to one another, and I will see you next week. Thank you all for watching, and have a good weekend.